So today's agenda is as follows. We will receive a CAEP office update, and then we'll move into the regional network meetings. So the regional network meetings is structured based on feedback we received in the spring from our regional network meetings, as well as feedback we received via the topics poll that we sent to everyone prior to the start of this iteration of regional network meetings. And so what will happen is we will have each of our partner agencies do a brief presentation to provide you with information based on the context of the polls, the results of the topics poll that we conducted prior to the regional network meetings, and then we'll go into open discussion and questions and answers. So it'll be us sharing information with you, and then we'll be sharing information amongst each other. So bear with us during the brief presentation. So Costas will do a brief presentation on reopening, as well as WestEd. They'll do a brief presentation on the services that they are providing to the field at this time. OTEM will do a brief presentation on technology and distance learning, and then CAEP TAP will do a brief presentation on student support services. So if during any time you have any questions, definitely feel free to type them into the chat, and we'll get to them as we are opening up for our questions and answers or our discussion. So I will turn it over to Dr. Carolyn Zachary, who will get us started with the CAEP update.
Great, thanks Veronica. I really appreciate you kicking us off for this webinar today. So I wanted to share with you a couple of surveys that we have been working on with a group of individuals from the field, and the purpose of both surveys. The first survey is a statewide student accessibility to technology intake survey. And I know that many of you have perhaps done this kind of a survey in the spring when we were pivoting to distance learning and online programs. But what we found was that the questions were asked differently in different organizations. And we wanted to be able to have something that was common so that we can actually use that data, because we're asking common questions. This survey is going to be on the a tab on the Cal Adult Ed website, and it will be for students to complete. It will be a way for us to take this information on what technology students have and be able to then use that statewide with the state superintendent, who has a task force looking at accessibility to technology, as well as with legislators. And you could also use this regionally with your local legislators. And lastly, we're looking at, the State Directors Association is looking at developing some fact sheets that are related to adult education across the country. And one of the areas that we talked about yesterday adding in was accessibility to technology and distance learning programs and some data related to that. So that will help us there as well. This survey, though, is going to have multiple uses. And the other use is then for you locally, you're going to be able to get your data, then you'll have a good idea of how your students are set up for technology. The other piece of this is that I realize that you may have students that you've had enrolled in your programs already and they're just continuing, so you wouldn't be doing any type of intake registration with them. And so this could then be used in a class where a teacher could direct the students to the link and have them complete the survey. So that's the one survey. The other survey that we're doing is related to how school is going to look for you as you are opening here in August and September. Looking at similar questions to what we asked in the spring, again, to give us that picture of how things are going to be looking. And we will likely do that survey probably twice this year, assuming things change, to just get a sense of how everything is looking. The other two pieces that I wanted to quickly add on to this are that on Monday at 3 o'clock, if you noticed in the CAEP newsletter, they're going to be doing a welcome back video or welcome back webinar that will be recorded. It's very brief, 10 minutes, similar to last year. And it's really designed for all staff. So I would encourage you to, if you have the opportunity, to send folks to that link to have them register for that webinar. It'll also be recorded so that you can use it at a later date. So it'll be a 10-minute webinar and then about 10 to 15 minutes of questions from the field. And so that's Monday at 3 o'clock. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Burlington English is doing a spotlight on California and how we pivoted during COVID-19 to ensure that our students were continuing to learn. And so that is on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. There is a registration link. Perhaps Netta will put that in there as well. And the first day is really focusing on kind of from the state level perspective and how we did that shift. Day 2 will bring in our leadership projects, OTAN, CalPro, and CASAS. And then day 3 will have some highlights from, sorry, I'm puppy sitting, from local programs and how they pivoted. And so those are next week, busy week next week. And I think that's all that I have.
Thank you, Carolyn, for sharing those details on the upcoming surveys. So definitely be on the lookout for those surveys that will be coming out very soon. Now I will turn it over to Jay, who will talk to us about how CASAS is supporting the field at this time as it relates to remote testing.
All right, thank you, Veronica. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. You know, I know a few of you have been in some of these other meetings, so I'll apologize in advance. It will be a broken record because I think my slides and topics are exactly the same, but I'll start with Octave Memo 20-5. You know, this is the most recent of 3 memos the feds put out in the spring in response to COVID-19. I like to use this as table setting for what we've been working on the last 2 or 3 months. Memo 20-5 allows for self-reported placement for the federal tables, but still requires a pre-test and a post-test to make a gain. You know, so normally you need to have a pre-test to qualify for federal reporting, period. So that second bullet is actually a big change because of COVID-19 and all the issues going on nationwide. They're allowing you to determine that student's class level, program level on your own, and then manually input whatever that level happens to be that you determined informally. I'll just say again, though, they do reiterate that that's just for placement, that if you want to make a gain, you still need a pre-test and a post-test like usual. There's a link with more information to the federal memos. So in response, we've been doing remote testing. Those earlier, before these federal memos, remote testing was not allowed, period. Before COVID-19, all pre and post progress testing had to be done with an in-person proctor. So that's another big issue, is they're now allowing remote testing to take place. So see, you know, what they also said is states could decide on their own whether to allow remote testing or not. So long story short is CDE checked the box that said yes for California, and we're definitely implementing remote testing in California. So with that, CDE sent a memo to the feds that outlined our plan. There's a link down at the bottom that provides that CDE memorandum that has all of those detailed guidelines at the bottom, but it basically just reiterated a lot of our CASAS test security procedures and put the rules in place for remote testing. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so, okay, next slide. Did we have a, okay, there we go. Sorry. Anyway, so a little bit on local assessment policy. I'll segue is part of the remote testing plan includes an agency remote testing agreement. We put that out in May. A lot of you did it in May, but a lot of you now have to do it again for the 2021 program year. So trying to make a long story short, short story long, is the remote testing agreement technically is part of your local assessment policy. So everybody did it in May to cover yourselves for program year 2019-20. Now, just like you need to update your local assessment policy at the start of any new program year, you also need to complete a new remote testing agreement. So you complete that remote testing agreement, send a copy to your CDE consultant and your CASAS representative, and just keep it with your local assessment policy. To this slide, as usual, you need to update and do a local assessment policy for the new year. We've been making a really big deal about Appendix C. Appendix C has existed of the statewide and local policy for at least 10 years. It's definitely nothing new, but you might say because of COVID-19, this is an area that we've dusted off a lot over the last few months because it's been the section of the policy that's always held our statewide guidelines related to distance learning. So you can see what it has. You know, it has the definition of what distance learning is, how to deal with remote testing, the specific distance learning curricula you're using. Is it videos? Is it educational software and so on? And then those different methods to record instructional hours. So like any year, you need to update your local assessment policy, but in particular, we're encouraging everybody to take a look at Appendix C and look at how you're dealing with distance learning and how you're addressing each of these areas that we agree sometimes can be a little bit more complicated when you're doing distance learning instead of quote unquote regular instruction. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit on remote testing overall. You know, here are some benefits. Obviously, the big benefit is you still need a pre-test and a post-test to achieve measurable skills gains. You know, obviously, it provides all the baseline like it always does. We had a discussion about this morning, as the federal memo is a little ambiguous, but certainly for now, it's clearly saying that pre and post testing is still required. So that's the big benefit, obviously. We do really see remote testing as probably continuing on past COVID-19. So adding this as a, you know, as more flexibility to how you do testing in the long run can be helpful as well. Next slide. That said, we know there's been some challenges. The equity issue has been the biggie. Students don't have enough money to afford computers, or maybe they do, but they're too busy sharing them with their children for school and things like that. They may be in a noisy environment where it's just not particularly conducive to things like remote testing. We know with budget cuts and so on, the cost due to paying proctors has been a really big issue as well. Next slide. Okay, if you want more information on it, we have lots of videos. It was a little bit, it took us a little bit of time, but we now have a few different videos that we think are very useful in figuring this process out. So if you're totally unsure about it, a really, really, really good first step would be to watch that initial video. It's about 5 minutes long, and it simulates student and staff of the exact process that the student has to go through, as well as what the staff has to go through all those steps to initiate remote testing. So there's a couple YouTube videos on our website. There's also several PowerPoints and some guidance documents that are there. I'll also point out that on that same website, you can access that agency remote testing agreement we referenced a couple slides ago. Next slide, please. We also have information to do remote testing of EL Civics COAPs and citizenship interview. I'll just say overall, I think probably the difficulties agencies have faced with this have been way less. The reports have been a lot more easygoing and positive about doing COAPs and SIT overall than the issues with remote testing generally. So I'd really encourage you to look at some of those guidelines, because there's been a lot of success on the EL Civics side with this. Some next slide, some other considerations. I know a lot of people have been doing parking lot testing. I've been in lots of network meetings where people have discussed that. That link you can see under that bullet is there's an agency in Michigan that did a video of this. We think, it should more or less match, the same process a lot of California agencies have done. So if you've heard about parking lot testing, but you're not sure what people are talking about, you might want to check out that video, which is, you might say an alternative to remote testing as well as an alternative to quote unquote regular testing. We also have had some agencies, play around with remote operations with an on-site proctor doing testing on site, while following all social distancing. So you name the creative, alternative, there's somebody out there that's at least tried it and explored some options on it. So there's all kinds of things like that agencies are trying out now. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just a summary table of all the options we have for remote testing at CASAS. Next slide. Okay, this is new today. So this is the one area where my presentation's different, as I can say there is a new TE build that was just released this morning. And one of the big line items is this new CASAS reading level indicator, or RLI. I'll relate this to that federal memo where, again, the feds say pre-post testing still required to report a gain, but you can do informal placement to get the person qualified for federal reporting. So we really think this RLI fits that perfectly. The two big advantages are you can do this on a cell phone. You don't need a regular computer. And it's also something that can be done without a proctor. So it's not an actual pre or post test. It just gives you an estimate, right? There are no student scores. That's 100% on purpose. It's intended to not give you a score. You would obviously need to do the full-fledged pre-test or post-test if you want to achieve a scale score. So the fact that there's no scores, again, 125% on purpose. The purpose of the RLI is just to give you an appropriate level. So a lot of you have said this should be helpful because you've said there have been issues with pre and post testing for all the obvious reasons, but you still have a need to do something more informal so you can move forward with the appropriate class placement and appropriate program placement and so on with all your students. So that's what this should do, is it will give you that estimated level so you can make sure the person is placed in the correct level classroom, and also, self-report that level for federal reporting. So again, it's Form 601R, and again, it was just released in the TE build this morning. Next slide. Okay, and then this is just showing a little bit about the process. I've likened it to that employment and earnings survey we've had now for the last year or two, where you use that student portal feature to send invitations via text, via email, or both. That same general process is what we're using for the RLI. So again, you've got that test invitations button that you click to send it out. And you can send the invitation via text, email, or both. You can just select which students you want to have take the LRI and send them an invitation this way. It'll show up on their cell phone, and they can then access RLI straight from that invitation and complete the entire assessment on their cell phone. Because it's worked in this fashion, as soon as they're done, it will go back and be inserted into the TE database so you can see that that student completed the indicator. Next slide. Okay, and this is just more screenshots. The one part I didn't mention is when you're all said and done with this, it will show up in the test lister. Again, it's not going to give a score, but it will list it as a Form 601R, just to record the fact that the students did complete this particular assessment. Next slide. Okay, another new feature, switching gears here a little bit, is the quarterly data submission wizard. So to be clear, this will be used for both WIOA 2 reporting as well as CAEP reporting. So historically, you've always had that data done automatically in TE, but not the data integrity report. A lot of you have pointed out that you've got to physically submit that extra PDF copy of the DIR to really get this submission complete. So now that we're using the quarterly data submission wizard, that's no longer going to be necessary. Each quarter you can use this wizard and it will automatically submit your quarterly data, as well as automatically submit that quarterly data integrity report to us to complete that submission. So this is a feature that's been in TE for a few months now, but we purposefully decided not to use it for end of year submission. We decided to make a clean break of it. So we'll be using this for the first time, started with the first quarter data submission that's due on or before October 31st. Next slide, please. Okay, another feature we have is a new agency toolkit. This was designed primarily for the WIOA 2 side because we have 40 or so agencies that are new to WIOA Title II this year. So we really felt we needed to have more resources for new agencies, but that's not to say it can't be very useful for CAEP reporting as well. But it basically has a lot of introductory information about e-test, TE, a lot of the instructional resources we have on the CASAS website, trainings available, and so on. So if you feel like, if you're new to this, or maybe you're not, but sometimes you feel like you're new to this might be a good place to get some basic level information about CASAS implementation and so on. Next slide. Another issue is we've been doing studies with HiSET and GED. So those of you who have been at it for a while know with our older assessments, you know, like life and work reading and life skills math and so on, we had the data that showed conclusively that positive performance on CASAS correlates to positive performance on the HiSET and the GED. With our new reading and math goals forms, we didn't yet have the data to say that, but we're just now completing those studies to show that CASAS reading and math goals directly correlate to both GED and HiSET. A big advantage from your end is that will mean we'll update that TE individual skills profile report. One of the most popular aspects of that report is that GED or HiSET predictor. That is, it will use the students' CASAS test results to make informed predictions about the student's likelihood to pass each GED or HiSET subsection. Next slide. Okay, another update, and I think this is the last one, is we updated our accommodations page. So this is an aspect of CASAS that's been there forever. That is, what sort of options are available to accommodate learners with disabilities that need to complete testing. So this has always been a tough part of this. In particular, visual impairments have always been a really difficult disability to accommodate. So making that long story short, we made a lot of upgrades to different suggestions to make accommodations for individuals with visual impairments. It covers other disabilities as well, but we really feel like we upgraded significantly, you know, more creative suggestions that you can use if you need to complete testing with individuals with disabilities. Okay, this is the last one. So the last but not least for sure, we have what we're calling I3 reports in TE. So I3 stands for Immigrant Integration Indicators, I3. These are new reports now in TE. I think they're in the state reports CAEP section of TE. But we've got two updates with this. So again, it relates to that AB 2098 immigrant integration legislation from about a year and a half ago. There was a lot of work done by a work group in early 2019. There were lots of conclusions, but one of the biggies was the agreement that, you know, what we had in the EL Civics program, you know, was very, very strongly related to the immigrant integration indicators that a lot of the advocates have brought forward and was included in the 2098 legislation. So there's 8 different indicators now where we've related roughly 5 or 6 EL Civics COAPs to each indicator. So at the end of the day, you can run reports that are a lot like, you know, the CASAS competency reports. The statements reflect COAPs, not competencies, but they're statements about, you know, that relate those outcomes to areas of strength and areas of need, you know, to an individual student, to a class, or to an agency. The other update is there will be a new column on the TE summary this year. It'll be a special column just for I3. So look for that. That's not updated yet, but we will be soon updating the CAEP summary to show another outcome that you will have in your holster to be able to report in CAEP reporting. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Now I'll turn it over to Randy from WestEd. Randy?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. I'm just going to do a general update on WestEd activities for this program year relating to the major items within our scope of work. One of the things, though, that our team is fervently hoping is that consortia will reach out to us. We have a lot of professional development activities planned for this year, and we're doing a big pivot towards PD related to how people use the launch board, around things related to development of CTE pathways and use of the new CTE data tool that we've just kind of unveiled a couple of weeks ago. And then also AB 705 and topics related to the revision of the CB21 course levels to align with the federal educational functioning levels. But first of all, just on the changes to the launch board this year, we are currently getting ready to look at building some changes to the user interface and resource improvements. I mean, one of the things that we have found is that while people find the data interesting and useful, oftentimes they don't know how to fully interpret the calculations or the underlying issues that the infographics or the data tables are meant to help you understand relating to your student journeys. So one of the things we will be implementing fairly soon is the ability to do data extracts. We're working on some models for that currently, where you as a consortium would be able to pull down a consortium view of outcomes for all of the members of your consortium in a single view, so you can actually do kind of have that comparative discussion about how people are doing and ways that you as a consortium can be more effective in serving students. We've had a lot of requests for that. The other thing that we're going to be doing is looking at how do we layer better resources. So there's a resources section in the launch board now, and you can go in there and you could look at things related to labor market information or other issues. You can also find the metric definition dictionary there, which is often way too wonky and way too complex unless you're a major data head like people on my team are. So we're looking to try to embed resources so you can access them from anywhere in the site. So if you're looking at an infographic and you have a question, there'll be an icon you can click on, and you'll be able to look at either a natural language description that explains what the metric is measuring and in very simple terms, kind of how it's calculated, as well as you'll be able to pivot to a view to look at the calculation itself, which will help you see the underlying data elements that we use to build that infographic and metric. And so we're working on all those things this fall in parallel to the process of getting ready to release 4 of the launch board this next program year. Our target date for the release of Build 4 is March 1st, 2021. That date was chosen to coincide with the legislative requirement that we provide a report to the legislature that summarizes the data relating to the consortia and the CAEP program for the prior program year. So that is our current target date. We have missed that date a couple times, mostly relating to data availability, but things have become much tighter, I would say, with the Chancellor's office around getting those data sets clearly identified and getting them out to us on time so we can do the build. And obviously we work very closely with CASAS around the extract of the TOPS Pro Enterprise data that they send to us in order to be able to build the calculations using both MIS data and TOPS Pro Enterprise data, which are actually matched to each other for a number of the calculations, so to be sure that we don't count students twice, especially for community colleges who report both into TE and report their data through MIS uploads to the Chancellor's office. We have a whole range of professional development events planned for this year. Obviously, the big pivot around this is that we had thought we were going to be doing the kinds of events you're used to, where we come out for a day within your region or with a number of consortia and spend 5 or 6 hours really digging in, both kind of going through some underlying information and sharing information with you, but then having you actually do hands-on exploration of the data sets, of the data tools, or having working sessions related to important professional development topics for consortia. But currently on the list, we are still planning to do a rollout of what we have done in the past. We'll do a revision of how to use the launch board data for program improvement and planning, specifically how to use the way in which the data is organized as a student journey, because what we want consortia and practitioners and agencies to be able to do is to begin to identify where in the student experience for our students can we get better, and to focus in. Is it on access to our programs? It is on student progress in either EFL attainment or occupational skills gains or workforce preparation milestones? Is it transition from adult basic ed or ESL into adult secondary ed, or is it in transition from adult education to post-secondary education more generally, and the achievement of post-secondary credentials, including low unit credit credentials, high unit credit credentials, adult education CTE certificates, or associate's degrees. We actually count all 4 of those outcomes. And then also all the employment gains. Some people really want to double down on employment and be sure they can manage that transition of folks from their educational experience into the workforce, and have invested in things like transition specialists at the back end to help people get connected actually to employment. We want to build upon the non-credit coding workshops we did last year, do some work around non-credit code alignment. By that, what we mean is we would actually like to pull the non-credit codes that colleges are using and sit down with you and explore the coding issues in the underlying data that may be impacting why your data is displaying in certain ways on the launch board. Oh, excuse my dog, hold on. Thank you for pausing there for a moment. Okay, thank you, Veronica. So the other thing that we want to focus on this year is CB21 and AB 705, how to help math, English, and ESL faculty at both community colleges and adult education programs build better transition sequences for students to help them access and get into post-secondary education and complete college level coursework. We would do that using the actual rubrics themselves and course records to actually be able to identify ways to kind of align coursework to help kind of strengthen that transition work. Finally, some of you were probably on the webinar for the CTE data tool that we debuted a couple of weeks ago. We want to do some professional development around helping consortia develop stronger pathways using that tool. Next. So these are some of the data issues and metric elements we're looking at this year within the launch board, particularly in relationship to non-credit coding. And I know that colleges will be particularly interested in this. And so we have issues related to how colleges are using supervised tutoring and study skills and coding those as non-credit courses and having them show up in the data. So we're going to be working to try and be sure that we don't count those instances where colleges are coding tutoring sections for credit students as adult education students as a way to do some data cleanup. And that's a pretty significant change that will change the numbers for a number of colleges, but what it will mean is that the numbers that colleges see initially will look much more like what they're expecting to see. We have some issues related to basic education and secondary education top codes that we need to explore with the Chancellor's Office, and those are part of some metrics issues, conversations that we're having at a state level right now to get some guidance around policy from the Chancellor's Office about how to handle that issue. We have issues with colleges using census reporting for non-credit instead of instructional contact hours. That's another area. And then we're beginning to have, we would like to explore how we can use both the CASAS employment survey data and the CTE outcome survey data in the adult education pipeline. None of those data sources would be complete or be a complete picture of employment, but also matching to the UI wage data is not as well. So it would allow 3 different ways to kind of look at what's happening to students after they leave. We're still looking at some updates to MIS elements like high school equivalency or high school diploma award codes. And we want to begin having conversations with CASAS about the incorporation of the COEPs and immigrant integration data sets. Next. So finally, one of the things that we've done that's new this year is we did an exhaustive survey of CTE offerings and CTE programs in adult education last year. And I think some of you were probably on a webinar with us a couple of weeks ago where Ali Bolela, who is just brilliant at this kind of thing, and I kind of showed a new data tool we've created that allows people within regions to look at kind of what's being offered in your area related to certain occupational clusters in K-12 adult education, in community college non-credit programs, and community college credit programs, and then compare that to different sort of slices or cuts of occupational data in your region. We did this as not to sort of show how things are aligned or not aligned as much as to help regions and to help agencies and consortia have those conversations about how you build integrated and really coherent CTE sequences that can begin in adult education and end up with some form of college certification leading to ideally a living wage job. And so as part of the professional development, we will be probably doing some sessions throughout the year, working with the tool, inviting practitioners to participate and really talking about pathway construction and design and the way to leverage the tool for that. As you can see from the link on this page, and I know the webinar, you have the ability to download it. You can download the webinar itself and sort of see Allie and I kind of lay out the tool as well as kind of the background of the project in that place. So thank you very much for having me.
All right, thank you, Randy, for those updates and the plans that WestEd have for CAEP moving forward through the 2020 to 2021 program year. Thank you so much. Now, I saw in the chat that we do have a question that I don't believe we got to, and I believe this question is for you, Jay. It's from Hillary. She asks, we aren't seeing student scores from RLI. Was that fixed in the new build?
Right. Well, I think I addressed that because I saw that when I didn't see who it was, but I saw it. To be clear, that the fact that there's no score is not a fix. That's 125% on purpose. Because again, the RLI is not with a proctor. It doesn't have a specific scale score range. Again, it's purposefully designed just to give you that ballpark figure so you can assign the person an appropriate level. So you still need the regular pre-test or post-test if you want to scale score and you want to be able to measure gain, but the RLI will give you that more informal assessment so you can at least place the student in the appropriate class and program.
Okay, and did you see Hillary's follow-up? She says they aren't getting
the ballpark figure should be, I mean, it's hard to say, but you should be getting, by ballpark figure, what I mean is you'll get an NRS level. So instead of it saying CASA scale score of 205, it's going to say ESL 4, ESL intermediate low. That is, it will just give you which of those 12 federal levels that score equates to rather than a specific scale score like you're used to with the CASA's pre or post.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jay. And Hillary, I hope that answers your question. If not, please let us know. And I don't see any more questions. However, if anyone does have any questions for either Jay or Randy, please be sure to type them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question at this time. And so while we're waiting for people to ask their questions either in the chat or to unmute themselves, the slide that you're seeing at this time is the adult education reopening for 2020-21. In the topics poll that we sent out to everyone, we asked everyone to rank the areas of importance for you at this time, and adult education reopening for the current school year was the top rated. And as you can see, it was rated in the 70, I think it was like 66%, excuse me, rated this as the most important area of concern at this time. And so we want to gather more data just to kind of guide our conversation this afternoon as it relates to reopening, and then also as it relates to devices and technology and distance learning and professional development. So I would like to invite everyone to partake in this poll that I am launching. Hopefully you see it on your screen, and it's asking you 3 questions. The first question is, does your agency have a solid plan for reopening with distance learning for the fall? And then the second question is, has your adult education program been included in any K-12 device distributions? And then the third question is, are you prepared with professional development on strategies and resources for remote teaching and learning for the fall? And so I see people have started to answer the poll. And so I'll give you all just a minute or so to fill out this 3-question poll. We're getting close to about half of our participants who is answering the questions. And once we close it, I'll share the results with everyone. Okay, responses are still coming in. We have about a quarter of our attendees who have not filled it out yet. Okay, I think our contribution to the poll has slowed down just a little bit, so I'll give it just a few more seconds and then end the poll and share the results with everyone. So if anyone wants to complete it, you have about 5 more seconds to do so. All right, great. Thank you so much for filling out that quick poll just to allow us to gather a little bit more data on what's going on at this time. And so I am sharing the results. And as you can see, when it comes to a solid plan for reopening with distance learning for the fall, we have about 74% who says yes, their agency does have a solid plan. So that's great. Then we have about 26% who says no, their agency does not have a solid plan. So depending on, you know, what the obstacles are or how the planning is going, hopefully you'll be introduced to some information this afternoon that can assist in solidifying that plan, if at all possible. And then question number 2, as we have been seeing with our other regional network meetings, majority of our attendees were not included in the K-12 device distributions. So thank you for answering that. And then in terms of professional development, we have about 68% who says yes, that they are prepared with strategies and resources for PD as it relates to remote testing, with about 6% who says no. So hopefully you'll hear something this afternoon as well that will assist in those professional development opportunities for strategies and resources for remote teaching and learning. So thank you all very much for that. I'm going to close this poll at this time and then move on to the 3 subtopics for adult education reopening. And so as you can see here, some of the top areas as we have been discussing are remote testing, registration, enrollment, and also instruction. And so I would like to ask the audience, has anyone on the call successfully transitioned to remote testing? And if you have, would you mind sharing with us how your agency went about transitioning? And please feel free to unmute yourself. And I'm seeing in the chat some activities. So Sally tells us our readiness is mixed depending on program. And so I believe that was in response to the poll and the adult education reopening plan. And then Tashelle says K-12 and excluding colleges where adult education programs exist, looking into but hugely overwhelmed. Okay, Tashelle, I'm not sure what you were referencing with that last statement.
The first half was dealing with the question number 2, where it said K-12 specifically, and if you're a community college, then the answer has to be no because it says K through 12.
Oh, okay, got it. And okay, so were there any opportunities from your college where you were able to distribute devices to your students?
Laptops, yes.
Okay, great. So was there a separate program set up? Did you utilize CARES? Okay, great.
We use CARES, but it was a separate program for it. And then the second half is for the remote testing that we have not begun remote testing, but we of course are looking into it, but are hugely overwhelmed with the prospect of it.
Okay, and do you mind sharing with us some of the barriers that you all are experiencing when it comes to?
We are a community college. Our community college is definitely closed at minimum through December. The campus is closed, including to staff. And so the process or the idea or the thought of trying to potentially one-on-one remote testing anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 students effectively it's overwhelming. Or even the idea that many of our students, even though they may have laptops, a lot of them still are using cell phones. And a lot of them are just hugely, like the idea that it take them 2 days to update their laptop. So the idea of giving them a test and having to call them on Zoom and get onto, I mean, even though they do some Zoom for their classes, just getting onto Zoom and calling them and having to explain how the whole process works, just the process itself. I'm sure it's working for other people, but I'm trying to get my head around how to even begin that process for our students.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing some of those barriers that you all are experiencing in implementing remote testing. Is there anyone on the line who may have successfully transitioned to remote testing who may be able to offer some guidance to Shell and what she's experiencing at her college? Okay, I'm not hearing anything at this time, but definitely feel free to type into the chat if you have any tips or any guidance on how your agency has successfully transitioned to remote learning. Okay, so I will turn it over to Otan, who will talk to us about technology and distance learning. And to Shell, to your point, they do cover a little bit on cell phones, so hopefully that'll be helpful to you at this time. So either Penny or Netta?
Okay, Veronica, this is Penny. I'm a coordinator here at OTAN for online and distance learning programs, and just wanted to share with you some of the resources that OTAN has available that might help with some of those questions that were raised in that survey to provide some additional materials and resources in that regard. And first and foremost, if you haven't gone to the OTAN website, I would really encourage you to go and visit. That URL is otan.us. And I don't need to share my screen, but in the PowerPoint presentation that Veronica provided, all of the links on this page are open and available for you. Just be sure to put it in presentation mode, and then those links become live. But on the OTAN website, we have lots of resources here, but I'm going to go directly and talk first about our COVID-19 field support page. And partly because this is where we have worked hand in hand with our other adult education leadership projects here within the state to provide resources surrounding the pandemic and materials to help in a variety of ways. So you'll see resources here from our sister projects, CalPro, as well as CASAS, and information posted from the CDE Adult Education Office, as well as from the CAEP, the California Adult Education Program. So these are all places, a kind of a one-stop shop in some senses, where you can get information about issues surrounding providing remote teaching, technology integration, the surveys that were distributed by the California Department of Education, information about remote testing that's posted by CASAS, as well as some resources regarding distance learning and an overview and how to report time, etc. There's also resources on this page for students. So that's usually more in line with, what is some of the responses from the USCIS for the coronavirus, the Census Bureau statement, making sure that we try to encourage our students to still complete the census, and other resources like from the World Health Organization, from the California coronavirus response pages, as well as from our other partners with CATISOL and CCAE as well. So that primary page gives you a lot of resources in and of itself. But at the very top of the page, there are some resources there that I encourage you to explore, especially for those of you that are really trying to implement and provide guidance and resources for your teachers on using and starting a distance learning program in terms of what do I need to do. So at the top of this COVID field support page, we have some links to what's called the I Can Go the Distance. And this is a wonderful little resource created by our friends at Corona Norco. And they got together a group of teachers to create these menus. And they're beautifully designed menus that are laid out just like a menu. So there would be like appetizers, and then there's like, the main course, and then there's the second course, and then there's desserts. And they've all been aligned to different program areas. So like with ESL, they provide tools that you may need for communication, face-to-face meeting time through web conferencing tools. They also have online curriculum regarding ESL, and they're all linked to those resources, so you can look at them and review them. And then for dessert, they'll add other resources like, Flipgrid or Voice of America. And again, these are individual pages for different program areas: ESL, citizenship, ABE, ASE, high school equivalency, etc. So I encourage you to check those out. Then for those of you that are really maybe still kind of finding your feet about starting distance or remote teaching or distance instruction, there's a report here called Ready, Set, Go: Steps to Rapidly Start Distance Education. And this is a very recent report. This was done in late July and posted by our partners at World Education. And it's really meant to help any administrator, teacher, anybody who's looking at, let's get started with distance. So it has resources and basically a step-by-step guide. Things like starting off, make a communication plan. What are your technology resources? How do your learners access the internet? Can find those resources that are free or reduced cost in your area. What are other leadership projects such as OTAN, CalPro, CAEP, CASAS? What do they provide to get you started? How do you get your staff trained in different parts of distance and remote teaching? So this is a really nice, timely guide. Again, that's on the OTAN COVID support page. It's very top of the page, and it's from World Ed. Ready, Set, Go: Steps to Rapidly Start Distance Instruction. And there is, with the questions that we heard earlier in the chat, there is one of our adult education agencies, West Contra Costa Adult Education. They created a really nice resource, Remote Learning Via Mobile Phones. And this is basically a consolidation of wisdom from all of their teachers about, individual and group uses with mobile phones, ideas for mobile-based learning. So they have pre-existing lessons, they have resources to Padlet. They show you how to use the online mobile-based apps for creating assignments in Google Documents. They show how to use Kahoot, and you can use Kahoot with your learners, and you can use them on cell phones. Of course, this is all guided toward mobile use. So they show you how you can let students use their phones to help them practice language skills. They can record themselves, they can play it back to their peers or play it back to the teacher, and so they can practice their learning skills. So this is just a few of the things on this particular resource, Remote Learning Via Mobile Phones. So if you or your teachers are kind of struggling with, okay, how can I get my learners to actually use their phones for learning, this might be a really nice resource. Now that's kind of at the top of the list. We also have, OTAN did a whole series of webinars since the shelter-in-place order in mid-March through the end of this current fiscal year, the end of June. And there is a link there to previous OTAN webinars. And okay, at first blush, when you look at this is a big, long list. Most people don't want to spend the time scrolling, but there is a link at the top of this page for our webinar index. And what I really like about this index, this was created by one of our project specialists, Anthony Burrick, and he has consolidated and curated and categorized and cataloged all of these different webinars that we've done over the several months into different categories, such as specific webinars about ABE, ASE, about particular tools like Buncee or Canvas, about cell phones, about citizenship, about Common Lit. These are all different topic areas. And there's a whole section from CASAS here about considerations when implementing distance learning, recording distance learning using TOPS Pro Enterprise, using co-ops and citizenships in a remote environment. So all of these in this index, it's really a nice way to go, okay, boy, I really need to teach digital literacy. So that's going to be from, we have resources about North Star and applied digital skills with Google. So they're all listed here on this on our home page for the COVID-19 field support page. So again, that was at otan.us. There's a big orange button on the right-hand side that talks about all of the resources that we have worked with our partners and our state leadership project partners to bring together in one place for you to not only look at those resources offered by others, but look at previous webinars that were recorded. That's not all that OTAN offers for teachers and administrators to get a good idea of what might be available out there. And I'm going to call upon my partner in crime, our fellow coordinator at OTAN, Netta Anasari, to talk to you about some of the projects that she works more directly with, including Teaching with Technology and our curriculum offers. So hopefully, I didn't look at the screen to make sure she's still here, but I believe she is.
I'm here.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone. Netta Anasari here, Technology Projects Coordinator for OTAN. And what I'm going to ask is if, so we're going to go over the Teaching with Technology tool, the curriculum offers, and some ways you can become a member and get first information on when we are releasing some additional support. So Veronica, can you stop sharing so that I can go live? All right. So you should be seeing my screen pretty soon here. I don't have that many tabs open today, so sorry
to disappoint.
I'm usually the one with like 25 tabs open. So this was the COVID-19 field support page that Penny was just going over. You'll see she referenced the resource guide, some of that menu. I can go the distance and a lot of the other resources she mentioned. In addition to that was the link to the previous OTAN webinars where she was discussing the index and where you can find some previously recorded webinars. But I do want to show you up here under resources. We have the Teaching with Technology tool, which is designed to assist you to find some supportive supplemental material to assist you in some of your program areas so you can take resources from these areas and embed them and use them in your blended learning and distance learning efforts online. So hopefully you'll find some value with some of these additional tools and resources when you're thinking about teaching with technology and teaching via distance. In addition to that, there are some resources located in our curriculum offers page. And we have resources that reference some options for teachers. So if you want to learn a little bit more on blended learning courses, you can look at the Essential Ed course here under for teachers. And with our partners, ISTE, SkillRise is a initiative through ISTE, if you're familiar with ISTE standards. So this is a separate initiative addressing adult education students and their needs and the transition into workforce and what is needed with education technology. So I would strongly encourage you to look at some of those courses offered by ISTE. And then when you look at the for students section, you'll find CK12, which is an open educational resource to help support you in with your ASC students. So specifically, we found courses with CK12 that address GED courses, so high school equivalency. I think to me, being an adult secondary instructor in the past, these resources can be used also if you're offering HiSET. So there are many different resources through CK12 and subject specific if you're a high school diploma teachers as well that want to find additional resources for econ and or history, et cetera, et cetera. So what we love about CK12, it's an open online textbook and you can find information that's current. Learn 360 is an online library, video library that you can use the videos and embed them in some of your online courses when you're starting to think about distance learning and building your distance learning course. Of course, the NROC project also has our developmental English and developmental math courses that are already built that you can potentially access and use at your agency. Our partners USA Learns, along with some additional resources through Learning Upgrade. And this list always changes, and we are always adding to it. So definitely check it, as often as possible. Become an OTAN member, which is free. So just to sign up to join OTAN and then sign up for the membership, then you'll be able to enter in your email address and you'll be notified immediately when we post more information on upcoming webinars. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I think I'm going to bounce it back over to Penny and ask Veronica to, and we have 2 additional slides. So
Right. I was going to just note where some of those the results of the survey on the next slide. So with Veronica can bring that up, that OTAN does have specific resources pertaining to those areas. So when we take a look at that slide on, I think it was 2, there we go. So these were the subtopics regarding technology and distance learning. And in the slide deck on these pages, there are direct links to many of the resources that OTAN has provided as part of our COVID support. So you'll notice that there was access, equity, and inclusion that was highly ranked at 74.2%. And we have 4 or 5 separate webinars, and they're listed in the notes on this slide about where you can find that information in our sets of webinars that we did. There's also information there about digital literacy courses, both for teachers as well as learners. So it also references the North Star, Learning Upgrade, Google Digital Literacy, etc. So some of the other items listed here, adult education curriculum, that was a 45%. Not only does we include the resources for CK12 that Netta just talked about, but we also have some other resources that we did webinars on that you could explore, which included Common Lit, Read Theory, Microsoft products for math or for language practice, a lot of math resources, and also another partner that we have with NROC is a website called Hippocampus. And Hippocampus is a site, it's free, open educational resources that allow teachers to create playlists based on subject areas, typically aligned to high school completion or high school equivalency. And it's a nice way to be able to kind of get a tasting of all of these types of webinars that are directly related to these 3 subtopics for online distance and education or online learning. So I encourage you to explore those. We do have them posted on our website, and they are available to you 24/7. And I think that they're resources that anyone can find very, very useful. And I see that there is a question from Diana about direct online synchronous instruction. Are any of these CK12 or others? And I'm assuming, I'm going to make an assumption, Diana, that you mean direct synchronous materials or synchronous instruction like through a web conferencing system?
Right, like through using Zoom, because I think a lot of them are for independent autonomous work, and I don't know if any of them have teacher resources to help them.
They do have teacher resources, but I'm not going to say that they're going to be very specific to this is how you can do X or Y. A teacher can certainly provide, a short lecture if they're using, say, I'll say a CK12 textbook, and this week's assignment is chapter 3. She can do, or he can do, a short lecture using one of the other synchronous tools like Google Hangout or Google Meet, Zoom, WebEx, any of the other ones that are available out there to provide that piece of direct instruction. But I don't know that these tools in particular offer that ability to just like click a button and say, yes, we're going to see the teacher. There's lots of multimedia in these tools that are asynchronous, so learners can see them anytime they wish, and they can watch them over and over again. So And Netta's got a
Yeah.
note in there about skill rise.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, everything I showed you in the curriculum offers page is asynchronous. You can use as asynchronous supplemental material as you're looking at your courses. But the ISTE Skill Rise course and the resources on the ISTE Skill Rise website, you can potentially find courses that are synchronous, but they're really kind of professional development related for teachers and administrators, and that is a live instruction.
All right, thanks.
Right. So,
I know you find more things for ESL than for HSC. So, and I know you do K-12. So, thanks a lot.
yeah, you're welcome. So that kind of ends our particular section here about talking about technology and distance learning. I think I'll toss it back over to Veronica to talk about the next section about student support services.
Before we toss it
Okay.
back, I was wondering if we could kind of hear from any participants on their distance learning efforts for fall. I mean, I know some folks are using Google Classroom, so it'd be really beneficial for the entire group to hear from their colleagues on how they've designed some of their distance learning offerings. Is anybody willing to share?
Or we can pick on people.
I see some friendly faces.
I do too.
Paula from Torrance, and I know Tashelle spoke earlier. But is there anybody that could potentially kind of share what they're doing? Oh, I see. Google Classroom and Zoom for synchronous instruction. Hillary, can you get on mic and share what you're thinking there? Or Paula, I see that you went.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
perfect. Thank you.
yeah, it's Torrance Adult School. So let's see, we've got a majority of our students, our teachers are using Google Classroom, and some are using, and probably I would say the rest of them are using Google Sites. And then they upload onto Google Sites links and different resources for their students. We are doing extensive PD throughout the fall term, actually on every Friday at this point, so that teachers can get very well their knowledge base is increasing with the Google Classrooms and Google Sites. So pretty much we're just using Google tools. We are using Moodle because we do have our ASE using NROC and EdReady. And we do also, and then we use Zoom and or Google Meets as a way for meeting.
For video conferencing, that's
Yes.
great. So when you're saying you're using Google Sites, so your students are accessing your, is each program area, do they have one Google site? Does each class have a Google site? How's that?
Yes, each site has a Google, well, each class creates their own Google site, yeah. So for example, in our CTE, we've got one of our instructors has his Google site for MOS. So he has Word, he's got Excel, PowerPoint, Access, and he uses that Google site, and all his students can log on to that. And then for, let's see, one of our instructors in ESL has a Google site, and her agenda is on there for every day, and just all the different resources that she uses. So when they do the Zoom, but then they also log into the Google site as well.
That's great. Are you, I don't know if you've tried, can you tell us any success stories with Beginning ESL? I know that's always a concern about getting Beginning ESL online and running. Have you talked about strategies with Beginning ESL and how to get them online?
That is, you're absolutely right. It is, that is a difficult, and our instructors, are also struggling with trying to put things online and communicating with their students. So what we have done is for levels 1 and 2, we've combined the classes, and so we've got 2 classes that are like that. And then there's 2 teachers in each so that they can support each other and help the students to get on.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Paula. And I see the chat is also active. There are agencies that are using WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger to reach their students. Yes, we've heard WhatsApp has been very popular and easy to use. Penny added. And then for some other folks that asked about the teaching with mobile phones, Penny added that link to the Google Doc on that piece on teaching with mobile phones. I appreciate you, Paula. Thanks for sharing. And I'm going to hand it back over to Veronica.
Thank you, Netta and Penny. And thank you all very much for participating in that segment and for participating thus far. So we're going to move forward with the Student Support Services section. So this was ranked 3rd in terms of the areas of importance for you all at this time via the topics poll that we had sent out. And so the subtopics for student support services are, employment with 54%, and counseling transition services with 49.2%, and mental health support with 40%. So those were the top 3 subtopics in the student support services section. And so what we want to do is, if anyone wants to share how you have been supporting your students during this time, that would be great, whether it be in these top 3 areas or if there are other areas that you have been supporting your students during this time. So anyone who wants to share, definitely feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Sophia speaking, and I wanted to share a little bit of what we're doing. I was typing some notes, but I figured it'll be faster if I just say what we're doing. Our students have so many different needs that it's sometimes difficult to predict or anticipate what they're going to need. So we're using a all hands on deck approach to identify what they need and the services that we can provide. One of the things that became immediate was that our instructors needed training on how to teach remotely or through distance learning, but that our students also needed that. So we're working on developing a very quick class, and in community colleges, curriculum development is never quick, on how to teach students how to be successful in a very new environment for them, which is remote or distance learning. We are also supporting their need for in-person services. So what we did on our end is that we actually extended our operational business hours to include evenings and Saturday mornings, and through social distancing and careful guidelines allow in-person services so we can help students with admission and registration and provide them with answers to all the questions that they have. We also expanded our communication approach. We used to be either phone, we expanded to chat, Cranium Cafe, text, email, phone calls, in person, you name it. Let's see. Even though we are sort of closed, our campus is actually closed right now, we got permission from the county as well as from our president to actually open classroom space. The reality is that many of our students are in a situation where having a quiet space to study is crucial for their success. So we are leveraging the classroom space that we have right now so that we can provide some on-site instruction, in-person services, office hours, space where students can get some tutoring or mentoring, even a quiet space to study. We've expanded our technology, so we have a laptop lending program, we have a textbook and materials lending program, and we also moved very quickly in removing all the materials fees for our courses so that they could be completely free to students. We've bundled classes and we're marketing classes with unemployment being high in our area. So we have a lot of career training programs now that are completely free to students with the necessary support systems. So for example, our digital literacy classes, we're opening one of our computer labs so that students can do lecture and theory remotely, but then they can actually come to campus and use the computers to practice what they're learning. And because parents are in this together, we're also bundling some of our basic skills courses so that they can become support courses for the parents who are helping their kids study. So if you forgot how to do fractions, if you forgot how to do algebra, we're here to help you. Let's see what else we're doing. And then the other thing that we did, although we're leveraging CAEP funding for a lot of these services, there are things that are not necessarily covered under CAEP. And so we are partnering with our workforce resource centers, our local resource center, and also with our workforce development board, because all the different partners under the workforce development board have the ability to provide funding that we can't. So for example, funding for transportation, funding for childcare. And this is an important relationship because we're able to come together to the table to figure out what we need to do to help individuals either get the education they need, the high school diploma, the training needed to find employment quickly, or be able to even transition to credit programs. So those are some of the things that we're doing on our end. And I'm sure that there is more, but there's other ones that I can come up with off the top of my head.
All right, thank you so much, Sophia, for sharing the many ways that you all are supporting your students during this time. The one thing that I heard is that you have been given permission to open up your classrooms for office hours or for study time and things of that nature. Are you seeing students take advantage of those services since they are in person? And
they're actually, this is the first week of classes, so we still have students registering for our classes and they're coming in person.
Oh, okay.
And then I am working with our instructors or with the counselors to develop some sort of a schedule so that we can have, so under social distancing guidelines, we can stagger how classrooms are open because obviously custodians would have to come in, clean up the room after each visitation and so forth. So we're working on that piece, but I'm very thankful that the president for our college was very open to the idea and understood that our population needs that hands-on approach, that they really need help, and that help needs to be in person because of the many different things that they're facing. So yeah, I think that we're trying to be present for the community and trying to provide some sense of normalcy, even though with COVID, we have to define what normalcy is, because the courses that they're taking with us are extremely important for their success, whether it's economic, whether it's family, whether it's education, whether it's personal, and being part of their journey is extremely important. So being there for them in this way, I think sends a message that we really care about them and for them. Yeah, so there we go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was just interested in that, but that's great that your president was open to meeting the needs of the students, even though it's not necessarily in alignment with what the rest of the state is doing. So that's great. That's great that you all are doing that. And so I heard you mention that you are leveraging your partnerships with other agencies such as the Workforce Development Board and things of other agencies to kind of supplement what you're able to offer under CAEP. And so I want to know from the audience, are any other of our attendees, are you all leveraging partnerships with other organizations to kind of fill the gap of what you are unable to provide with CAEP funding?
Hi, this is Corley Prieto from the Santa Barbara Adult Education.
Hi, Corley.
Hi. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but apologies. I've got a big fan on top of me here.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay, so we're partnering with, we've extended our reach to the local libraries. They actually serve as the main arteries to host potentially some of our classes. So we have our Santa Barbara main library, our Goleta library. We're also trying to partner with our Carpinteria library. We have also Community Education Center, Equalitech. These are a non-government organization for teaching pre-computer skills training. We also have a strong relationship with our local workforce. One of our board members, he's on the local workforce, and so we tried to actually, before COVID, we had our classes actually within the social services buildings for our Career Skills Institute classes. And unfortunately, COVID, now we're doing the online training, but we're trying to pivot to online, fully online, to continue fostering that relationship with workforce. And that's all for now. Oh, and also we're trying to get together with our local organizations like Salvation Army and some of our thrift stores to leverage those funds, and also a transportation service to actually take our students to either the, once we do meet online, to the libraries or to our campuses.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Coralie, for sharing with us what you are doing to support your students in leveraging additional partnerships so that you can provide as many of the essential needs as possible. And so another thing that we wanted to know, especially as it relates to student support services and when we think about mental health support and what we all are experiencing at this time, one thing we wanted to know is how are you helping to keep you, your staff, and students healthy and at optimum functioning level at this time? So if I can have someone unmute themselves or either type in the chat just to let us know how you are taking care of yourself. I know on our call on Monday, one of our attendees was saying how some of the staff, checks in on their students, and it's not necessarily related to instruction or things of that nature, but just to simply check in with them to see how they are doing and how their families are doing and, things of that nature, really just to give that level of comfort and let them know that we care about what they're going through at this time. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves. Sally, are you still on the line? Do you want to maybe unmute yourself to answer that question, or to just let us know how you all are supporting your students at this time?
Hi, yeah, we have done exactly what you said. The teachers have been checking in on families, especially our ESL teachers were doing that in the spring. We haven't got our ESL program up and running yet. We've got a lot of barriers there, but we have had our teachers checking in with families and making sure that they have the resources that they need. For example, if they have got students in the school system, to make sure that they're getting the lunches, and then our school system has a family resource center to make sure that they're getting connected to that. So those kind of things we're doing as much as we can.
Thank you so much, Sally, for sharing. Definitely appreciate that feedback. And we have about 5 more minutes left. So if anyone has any additional questions, it doesn't necessarily have to be related to student support services, but if you have questions for Randy Tillery and what's going on with Launch Board or the PD offerings that they will have for this upcoming program year, if you have any questions for CASAS, Jay is still on the line. So if there's anything you want to ask of him, we still have OTAN on the line. So if there's anything that you would like to ask them about related to technology and distance learning, feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat. We have about 5 more minutes before we close this session. Or if there's anything that you want to share in general that is taking place at your agency, successes, challenges, barriers. Coralie, she asks in the chat, are there any local consortia addressing social justice and integrating it with your annual plans? So is anyone addressing social justice in your annual plan? In the annual plan memo that came out, I believe it was in June, that was one of the 3 areas the CAEP office asked consortia to address, in addition to the impact of COVID-19, as well as the state of our economy and budget. Okay, Coralie said that they are creating a consortium-focused resolution. And Diana says that CATISA has some great resources and CalPro will have an equity training soon. So be on the lookout for that. You can access CalPro trainings as well as CASAS and OTAN and CAEP TAP trainings on the California Professional Development Training page. In Corelight, you can also check in NOVA if you want to scan some of the annual plans that have been submitted and or approved. You can scan other consortia annual plans to see what they have done. And Randy says that his team would be very interested in discussing how consortia are addressing social justice issues. They are trying to develop a PD for colleges on social and racial justice that could be used for consortia and planning. That'll be great, Randy. Let us know if you want us to put any type of communication out regarding your PD efforts to consortia. And Sophia states that they are aligning their objectives accordingly. For example, our CAEP objective of increasing student access to programs allow for justice, social justice narrative and work. Okay, and there was a webinar, Coralie says, by the Chancellor's Office, and I'm presuming it was on the same topic. Okay, great. She said yes. Okay, so we are about 2 minutes into before we close. Sophia just stated that they are nurturing an anti-racist campus culture, so that is wonderful. So as I mentioned previously, that this network meeting was recorded and will be available on our website, the California Adult Education website, and it'll be available tomorrow. So definitely feel free to access it. Again, also feel free to access other regional network meetings that have taken place. This is our 4th regional network meeting. We have 2 more to go next week on Monday and Wednesday with another one in the Southern California Inland Empire area. And then the last one on Wednesday will be covering the San Diego and Imperial Valley area. So if you found things interesting here and you want to see what other people are doing in those 2 regions, definitely feel free to register for those events. I see Diana typed in the chat the URL for the professional development training page. So definitely feel free to access that page and explore all the opportunities that are provided via the California Leadership Projects. As you all know, the CAEP Summit 2020 will take place on October 26th through October 29th. And at this time, we are still accepting proposals. So if your agency or your consortium wants to put together a proposal on things such as leadership, equity and cultural awareness, any of those strands that we have, I think there are 9 on our page, definitely feel free to submit a proposal. The submissions close August 28th. So we want to make sure that we are hearing from everyone and learning from one another during these challenging times. Does anyone else have anything else to say? Any of our partner agencies or anything? Okay, I am not hearing anything, but I want to thank you all very much for your time and your participation this afternoon. We greatly appreciated your time and enjoyed speaking with you all and learning from you all. Thank you to Carolyn from the CAEP office. Thank you to CAEP TAP, Renee and Holly, as well as Randy from WestEd, Jay from CASAS, and Netta and Penny from OTAN. Thank you all very much for your time and your participation. We look forward to hearing from you and participating with you next week. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Veronica.
You're welcome.